It could be that while the UFO phenomenon is indeed real, the disclosure that takes place is an attempt to manipulate people and one that distorts the truth. If disclosure is coming, when will it be? I suspect we're looking at some time from 2026, which is a year with some incredible astrology that we've talked about on this channel before. I made that prediction 3 years ago, and on May the 8th, 2026, the Trump administration released 161 government files on UFOs, with more coming.
Tonight, more mysterious images just revealed. 160 government files detailing 400 alleged UFO encounters, including this infrared military video from 2013 of what appears to be an 8-pointed star streaking across the sky. Mysterious white and black aerial blips that defy the laws of physics.
The astrology said this was most likely going to happen right now in mid-2026. And in this video, I'm going to lay that astrology out and, more importantly, expose what it tells us about who's controlling this narrative and what they may be trying to achieve. I'm Dan Waits, this is World Astrology Report, and welcome to another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. Before we talk about the astrology, here's where I stand on UFOs. They aren't either nuts and bolts craft or a pure consciousness phenomenon. If mind is the substrate of reality, then advanced beings can surely manifest matter through consciousness, which means that both of those framings are right and wrong. And unfortunately, both of them are being weaponized right now, which we'll talk about later. Now, about 9 a.m. on the morning of May the 8th, the Trump administration released 161 UFO files containing reports and pictures and videos that seem to show UFOs captured on film. But what are we really looking at here? Who's behind these craft and why are they here? Well, we haven't been given any answers, and possibly the US government doesn't even have them itself. But an astrologer never just asks what or why, but why now? So let's unpack that. First of all, it's always worth looking at the lunation, meaning the new or full moon that arrives before a major event to understand the spiritual and metaphysical weather of that moment. This announcement came following a full moon in the secretive sign of Scorpio on May the 1st. Here's what I had to say about that in my May forecast video. This is a culmination or a revelation or a turning point in the dark domain of secrets, sex, psychology, desire, and deep human connection. The closest aspecting planet to this full moon is Pluto, which is squaring it from the 6th degree of Aquarius. And actually, Pluto is stationing retrograde right around this time, with its exact station coming on May the 6th. So the Plutonian energy of transformation through crisis is going to be much more active around this time. So there'll be a powerfully revelatory, excavatory feel to this lunation. Expect the revelation of secrets. Full moons color the 2-week period following their appearance, so the release of the UFO files came under the auspices of that revelatory Plutonic Scorpio full moon. But what about May the 8th itself, when the files were released? Well, at 9 a.m. that day, the moon was closing in on a conjunction with Pluto, which had just stationed retrograde, emphasizing its darkly revelatory energies. And right now, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are in a remarkably rare harmonious configuration, a minor grand trine. Both Pluto and Uranus have to do with revelation. Uranus, the sky god, reveals from above in flashes of inspiration. Pluto, the god of the underworld, releases from below, bringing eruptions of the unseemly truth from beneath the surface. Neptune adds a mysterious and potentially illusory element to what's being revealed. After all, we may have seen some of the files, but they only prompt more questions. So here's what's clear. The outer planets were highly influential here, and that's as we'd expect when we're dealing with forces that are seemingly out of this world. But we can understand more about what this configuration is promising by digging into the individual synodic cycles that it's constructed from. And we'll start with Pluto-Neptune, because I've come to see that cycle as the master cycle, the cycle that you have to understand before you look at any of the others. If you enjoy this video so far, please do click the like button down there and subscribe to the channel to let YouTube know that you like this kind of thing. And another very quick announcement about my next World Astrology Report members live stream. It's called How I Make World Astrology Report, and I'm going to reveal a lot of my thinking about how to do astrological research and how to turn it into compelling content and play the YouTube game. If you want to do something similar to what I do, then this is the stream for you. The stream is taking place on Saturday, May the 23rd at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 1 p.m. UTC. You can purchase entry on the live streams page at worldastrologyreport.com, but entry is free for YouTube members at correspondent tier and for members on the website, which is where you can find my best value offer. Thanks for listening, and let's press on. The Pluto-Neptune cycle is, in my view, the master cycle of civilizational development, and it reveals shifts in the deeper trends that drive human society from below. In particular, it speaks to the intersection between power structures, Pluto, and our fundamental beliefs about the world, Neptune. In 1891 and 1892 came 3 conjunctions of Pluto and Neptune in the sign of Gemini, initiating a new 493-year cycle. And here I want to recommend a writer to you, and that's occult historian Heather Lynn and her Substack, The H-Files, which honestly I can't recommend too highly right now. She covers many of the things I talk about on this channel with great erudition, and quite honestly, she's on fire at the moment. And she has a recent article on UFO disclosure that I found very insightful. It's called Tired of the Aliens Yet? That's the point. I've linked it in the description below because it's a must read in my opinion. In that article, Lynn points out that this issue is mostly being framed in the media right now through a particular question. Is the phenomenon the work of aliens or demons? Prominent politicians like J.D. Vance and commentators like Tucker Carlson are suggesting it's demonic. And then you have the standard framing of UFOs, which is that they represent visits from aliens. The problem is that both of these framings are crude responses to a complex and nuanced phenomenon. The demonic framing hands the right to define the phenomenon to the church. The aliens framing is a gift to the materialists. Lynn writes that many factions are jockeying for the right to name this phenomenon and so to define it right now. And she argues that there's one faction that's been preparing for this moment for a long time. And she traces its influence back to the late 19th century with the founding of the Theosophical Society by Helena Blavatsky in 1875. That society was really getting going at the time of those last Pluto-Neptune conjunctions. Blavatsky's book, The Secret Doctrine, was published in 1888 with the planets very close to conjunction. Now, Lynn argues that the Theosophists also developed a theology that's highly relevant to what's happening with the UFO disclosure process right now, because the Theosophists held that advanced beings, so-called hidden masters, have long been guiding civilization from behind the scenes. This is very, very similar to the idea that advanced extraterrestrial intelligences are guiding or helping humanity. And those ideas are all over the New Age now. What's interesting to me is that the Theosophists were injecting this notion of ascended masters into the culture during the 1890s at this seed moment. And something else that happened in that decade was the mystery airship wave of 1896 and 97, when there were hundreds of sightings of fast-moving airships across the United States at a time before such craft were known to have been developed. This was a kind of archetypal UFO invasion, albeit a harmless and genteel one. What really happened has not been resolved, but some researchers believe there were certain factions of humans who were privy to advanced scientific knowledge, and they kept it secret, but developed technology using it. Now, again, this was a conjunctional period, a seed moment for a cycle. And it's always worth looking at what ideas were circulating in the arts of the time of these seed moments. This was also the period when the first science fiction novels were being published by Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. In 1898, H.G. Wells published The War of the Worlds, a book about the invasion of the Earth by aliens from Mars. And so the idea that we could be invaded by aliens was really seeded in that 1890s conjunctional period. And of course, it would end up becoming something of a cultural obsession. And so in that single decade of the 1890s, the alien invasion narrative the Ascended Masters narrative, and something resembling an actual UFO phenomenon all entered the culture simultaneously at the seed point of the master cycle that we're still living through now. So these themes are embedded within the current cycle. And here I want to mention another thread that Heather Lynn pulls on in that same article. Because beyond the Theosophists and Madame Blavatsky, Lynn focuses her attention on another figure who developed a kind of spin-off of Theosophy in the early 20th century. That figure is the British-American writer Alice Bailey, who wrote 24 books on esoteric matters. She claimed these books were dictated to her by one of the hidden masters, who was named Djwhal Khul and is often referred to as the Tibetan. Shades of all the New Age channeling that you see on YouTube these days. Now, in her writing, Bailey claimed that the hidden masters were preparing to emerge from the shadows and start guiding humanity formally and visibly. She called this the externalization of the hierarchy. And many people have interpreted her writings to suggest that she thought that this would start happening right about now. And here's the weirdest thing of all. Bailey founded an organization to publish and carry forward her teachings. It was originally called the Lucifer Publishing Company, and then it was renamed the Lucis Trust.
And the weird thing is that today, the Lucis Trust is embedded within the United Nations itself.
It advises the UN on spiritual matters, and it even maintains premises in the UN building in New York. Now, what does it all mean? Well, the Pluto-Neptune cycle has to do with the intersection of power and belief. We saw how the Ascended Masters doctrine was spreading in the 1890s when the current cycle began. And in the Lucis Trust, we have an organization promoting these very ideas that's embedded within the center of global governance itself. Now, here's the thing. Pluto and Neptune actually spend an entire century in their waxing sextile aspect during this cycle. They entered that aspect in the 1940s, right when the UFO phenomenon emerged. They separated quite far from sextile, almost came out of orb in the 2000s, but now they're getting close once again and are entering the final phase of their long sextile. They're going to make exact sextiles every year between 2026 and 2032, marking this coming period as the end of a long period of development that started in the 1940s. They'll make their first exact sextile since 1986 in July of this year. That's one reason why I thought we would see something resembling UFO disclosure around this time. But there's another reason. Another cycle which is activated right now says the same thing. And this one gives us more insight into the true nature of this disclosure process. The Uranus and Neptune synodic cycle lasts about 171 years from conjunction to conjunction. They last met in 1993 when they made 3 conjunctions in the sign of Capricorn, a sign we associate with institutions and commerce. At this time came the public release of the World Wide Web. That fits the significations of these planets. We have a technology, Uranus, that connects or unifies Neptune. But these conjunctions tend to coincide with spiritual awakenings as well. And in 1993, at the seed point of their current cycle, Dr. Stephen Greer launched his pioneering Disclosure Project, which aims to get whistleblowers from the US government and military to testify to the existence of secret government programs involving UFOs. What's more, that same year, 1993, came the launch of a certain media phenomenon, the X-Files. The fundamental message of the X-Files was that aliens and various other quote-unquote supernatural phenomena are real, but that the government is covering them up. Of course, you could argue that since it's centered around the activities of 2 FBI agents, it was fundamentally about institutions and their relationship with the truth. Think again of that Uranus-Neptune conjunction, speaking to new belief systems, and the sign of Capricorn, the sign of institutions. But art, even kind of bad art, tends to pick up on the zeitgeist, and that includes the astrological influences of the moment. In 2017 and 2018, Pluto reached the degrees of those Uranus-Neptune conjunctions of 1993, 18 and 19 Capricorn. When a slow-moving outer planet triggers the degrees of an active conjunction, what you find is that the themes of that conjunction emerge into the world in a way bearing the flavor of that triggering planet. In December 2017, this groundbreaking story was published on the front page of the New York Times. entitled Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's Mysterious UFO Program. The story reported on a secret US military program to investigate UFOs, headed by counterintelligence professional Lou Elizondo, who supposedly resigned from the program to protest against excessive secrecy on this topic. Now, many people have suggested that this story and the program it reported was part of an operation to roll out a story that would present the UFO phenomenon in a particular way, i.e., as a nuts and bolts threat to America presented by non-human intelligences. Nevertheless, it marked a significant watershed, a shift from the decades of cover-ups and ridicule and denial that was attached to the UFO topic. You never used to see stories like that on the front of papers like the New York Times. What's also interesting, and what connects this to 2026, is that this development was heralded in advance by another unusual sky phenomenon. In October 2017, a couple of months before that story came out, the first interstellar object ever identified in our solar system was discovered. It was named Oumuamua, a Hawaiian word meaning messenger from afar arriving first. We've seen something very similar happen this year, as we'll soon see. Now, the thing to take from all this is that Pluto hitting those Capricorn degrees of the Uranus-Neptune conjunctions of 1993 awoke the potential of the cycle that began back then. And it did so through Plutonian means, Pluto being the planet of intelligence agencies, of power, of underworld machinations. So that was confirmation that this Uranus-Neptune cycle is indeed related to institutional UFO disclosure. Now, Uranus and Neptune made their first major aspects in this cycle that began in 1993 last year, in 2025, and they'll do so again in 2026 and 2027. They're making exact sextiles, and the sextile is really when whatever was seeded at the conjunction begins to show itself and emerge into the world. And right now, Uranus and Neptune are very close to exact sextile once again. Uranus moved back into Gemini on April the 26th of this year. And 2 weeks later, we see the release of the UFO files by the Trump administration. And once again, this move was heralded by another interstellar visitor, 3I Atlas, which is hurtling out of the solar system as we speak. 3I Atlas was all the rage for a few months in late 2025 and early this year. My position on that object has always been that it should be seen as a symbolic event of a widening perception of the nature of the cosmos, and that, like Oumuamua, it would probably herald a wave of UFO disclosure. But here's the thing, the astrology is telling us something important here. It's confirming some of the things that the disclosure skeptics are saying, which is that this disclosure can't be trusted. This Uranus-Neptune cycle began with conjunctions in Capricorn, just like the last one. Capricorn is the sign of established institutions, of the old earthy structures that control societies and business. And the whole question of the existence of UFOs is being pushed through a particular framing, an institutional framing, and in particular, a military one. And just as the X-Files coincided with Stephen Greer's disclosure project, well, just as this disclosure process is getting going, we're once again seeing popular culture being deployed alongside it. Because on June the 12th, Steven Spielberg releases his new film, Disclosure Day. Spielberg has played a massive role in pushing the alien narrative over the years with films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. and War of the Worlds itself, which was written at the start of this cycle. Remember, there seems to be a two-track element to the way these UFO narratives are seeded. There are the whistleblowers, and then there are the movies, and they both seem to arrive at roughly the same time. That's how things roll in this Pluto-Neptune age of Gemini, an age of doubles, of bifurcations. Anyway, hopefully you can see now why I thought 2026 was probably going to be the year for disclosure, because we have not one but two major cycles concerning that theme reaching major aspects this year and right about now. But there's a third, and it's the signifier of a massive reset. Here we need to talk about the ongoing conjunction of Saturn and Neptune, which went exact in the very first degree of the whole zodiac back in February. These conjunctions bring resets to the world order, which I think it's fair to say is what we're seeing in the world right now. Think of the Trump tariffs, think of the breakdown of international trade, and so forth. These conjunctions also bring the establishment of structures Saturn, that regulate or control faith and belief, Neptune. This is a subject I dug into in my last video, this one, so I won't go over all of that again, except to point out that right now we're experiencing a reset of resets. This is a seed moment for the 36-year cycle that's beginning now, but it's so much bigger than that. And right now there's a war on to influence our most fundamental beliefs about the world. Our understanding of the UFO phenomenon, of what it really represents, is one of those battlefields. Heather Lynn puts it like this: whoever inherits the naming of the next non-human intelligence story inherits the next century of religious authority. That is the prize. But one more thing. I suspect it's absolutely no coincidence that this disclosure process is coming at the same time as the global AI rollout. People are increasingly allowing AI to become their principal source of information about the world. Control AI, and you can influence and perhaps even control people's most fundamental beliefs, including their spiritual convictions. Saturn-Neptune conjunctions bring the codifications and structuring of spiritual ideas, which can then go on to have massive political and geopolitical implications. And we're watching an AI takeover happening right now under the auspices of one of them. So I think it's important for all of us to keep this in mind and just to be very judicious about how much we trust what the AIs are telling us, especially about contentious political issues and about spirituality. Now, before we go, there's something else I need to tell you about in this video. And unfortunately, it's some really sad news. And that is that Gordon White, the magician, healer, author, and teacher who appeared twice on World Astrology Report, has passed away in Peru. Gordon was a brilliant, kind, and genuinely hilarious man who played a massive role in the modern occult revival through his blog, podcast, and school, Rune Soup. He inspired countless people to explore magic through his work, and I think that his influence is going to echo down the centuries, quite honestly. And something I've noticed is that great spiritual teachers and magicians and mystics often leave the Earth at the time of big planetary conjunctions. Helena Blavatsky left the world in 1891, the year of the conjunction of Pluto and Neptune. Aleister Crowley died in 1947, the year of a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Paramahansa Yogananda passed away in 1952, the year of a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And now we have another Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and sadly we've lost Gordon.
Conjunctional periods are hugely important seed moments when the themes and energies that will drive the coming cycle swirl around the zeitgeist. It's almost as if these figures inject the energy of their passing into that seed moment so that it can drive the cycle to come.
It really is a devastating loss and a big shock. But Gordon, more than anyone I personally know, was well prepared to make the journey into the afterlife. And I'm sure he knows now how much he meant to so many of us. So Godspeed, Gordon, you'll be greatly missed. The last time Gordon appeared on World Astrology Report was in September of last year in a video entitled The Great Unveiling, How to Think About UFOs. And it's very relevant to the subject of this video because I asked Gordon to come on the channel to help us understand the nature of the spiritual cosmos that we live in and get some much needed context to understand what UFOs actually are. I really recommend you watch it, and I've linked it below. And that's it for this video. In the bonus section, available for World Astrology Report members, whether here on YouTube or at my website, we examine some of the wider historical context of all this. And we'll see how the last Uranus-Neptune cycle essentially seeded Christian Zionism, and that ended up having a massive influence on Israel and helps to explain why it exerts such a strong influence on the United States to this day. Thanks for watching, and see you again on the channel very soon.